We're now going to 5.0 board, which is an action item. We will be voting on this tonight. I did consult with the South Carolina School Boards Association because typically when we make changes to policies, we usually do a first reading at one meeting, then we do a second reading at another meeting, then we take a vote. But since we're in an emergency status, I did consult with them, and they said that it is appropriate for us to have the reading and to take the action on the same night. I just wanted to clarify that in case anybody had any questions. What we're going to be talking about tonight is actually suspending some policies strictly based on what's going on in our district as it relates to COVID-19. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Dr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have certain policies that are policies like we've talked with Mr. Salters about facility rentals. We're not required to do facility rentals, but if we rent our facilities, we have a policy that walks us through that process. So we're not necessarily suspending that policy. What we're doing is we are not doing facility rentals for the time being. So we didn't include those kinds of policies on the list. But then there are certain policies that direct us to action. And while we were in this transitioning phase, we knew that was temporary. But now when we begin to look ahead into our year, this may stretch longer. So I think just in case, I asked our senior leadership team to bring forth any types of policies that would have needed to be I guess I want to say postponed or suspended for a temporary suspension as we deal with the coronavirus, because there are certain things that we're doing with the coronavirus that we can't really engage in our policies the same way. So Mr. Caldwell has three he wants to provide us tonight. And again, this may be something we do as we uncover other policies and bring it forward to you if we realize that there's something that we're currently not able to do. So that may be part of this ongoing process that we do. So Mr. Caldwell.
Well, wait, before he starts, let's get a motion and a second on the floor so that then he can, to make sure the board wants to hear this. They may not want to.
That's a good point. Thank you very much.
We're going to be discussing policy JFAB, which is admission of non-resident students. Do I hear a motion from that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily suspend the portion of policy JFAB, admission of non-resident students, as it relates to admissions of an international exchange students due to COVID-19?
Madam Chair, under the guidance of policy BDH, which gives the board the right to temporarily suspend board policies due to extreme emergencies, I move that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily suspend the portion of policy JFAB, admission of non-resident students, that relates to admission of international exchange students due to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Oh, I'm sorry.
It says that the suspension will be in effect until the end of the 2020-2021 first semester.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll give it to Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson has our second. Okay, at this time, we're going to open it up for discussion. Mr. Caldwell, you want to walk us through this, and then we'll open it up for questions or comments if we have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. And I want to be clear that we're not asking for a suspension of the entire policy. That particular policy deals with students who pay tuition. It deals with employees, children, and that sort of thing. But the section that deals with the international exchange students, the foreign exchange students, if you will, we just felt like it was in our best interest and in the students' best interest, the foreign exchange students' best interest, to not be traveling over here. They typically stay for an entire school year, sometimes for a semester. But because of the uncertainty of our times, we just thought it was in our best interest that we did not do that this year. To your point about the board amendments, we typically do. If we wanted to amend a policy, if we wanted to change a policy, it's about a 2-month process. We didn't feel like that was an efficient use of our time, because then it would be another 2-month process to get it back to normal. So we were reminded of policy BDH, and I think it's worth stating, and it's because it's very short. The operation of any section or sections of board policies not established by law or contract may be temporarily suspended to meet extreme emergencies by a majority vote of board members present at a regular or special legally constituted meeting. And I feel like that, I'm pretty sure that policy is in your board packet, but I wanted to put that on the record. So we are asking for the suspension of the international exchange students portion of the policy JFAB. One other note, when asked about how long, I don't want it to appear arbitrary. We chose end of first semester. That seemed to be a good stopping point at this point. And I would say that we may find as the semester progresses, not for this particular policy, because foreign exchange, they either come now or they don't come at all, but for the other policies I will bring forward, we have that same stop date. And it may be that we could reinstate the policies, or we may find that we need to make it even longer than it is. So again, I didn't just pull out a date out of thin air, but I felt like we needed to have some kind of idea of what we were looking at temporarily for the suspension.
And in case you're curious, the last day of the first semester is January 15th, 2021.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Caldwell before we vote on the suspension of the portion of this policy? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries and it is unanimous. We'll now go to policy JICG, which is a tobacco and nicotine use policy by students. Do I hear a motion that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily modify the enforcement section of policy JICG, tobacco and nicotine use by students due to COVID-19?
Madam Chair, under the guidance of policy BDH, which gives the board the ability to temporarily suspend board policies due to extreme emergencies, I move that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily modify the enforcement section of policy JICG, tobacco and nicotine use by students due to COVID-19. First offense consequence related to in-school suspension will be altered as follows. Students will report to in-school suspension to complete the tobacco cessation course. Once completed, students will return to class. The second offense consequence, which requires a student to complete 6 hours of school-based community service, will be temporarily suspended due to safety concerns. This modification will be in effect until the end of the 2020-2021 first semester.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Okay, Mr. Caldwell, we'll turn it over to you to walk us through this one, and then we'll open it up for questions
And
again.
again, just for clarification, the same thought process as explained earlier. The current policy says that a student with a first offense would go to in-school suspension for the entire day, and while in-school suspension would complete a tobacco cessation program. That program is in place, but seat time is so much more important now, face-to-face seat time. Particularly with the hybrid model, we felt incumbent upon us in student services to ask you to amend that so that a student would go to in-school suspension, complete the course, but then be allowed to go back to class for the rest of the remainder of the day. The second part of this is a second offense, and you'll remember we modified this policy last July. And then we modified this policy again last October. So we had lots of conversations about this back last fall. But the second offense there's several consequences that result in a second offense, one being a 6-hour community service component. And we felt like if we could limit the movement of students and not have them doing things outside of their normal, what is now the new normal in a school day, it would probably be in their best interest and in everyone's best interest that they're not moving around the school for that. So we're asking for that particular offense, that particular consequence, be suspended.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caldwell. This is regarding policy JICG, tobacco and nicotine use by students. We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Oswald. We have a second on the floor from Dr. Powers. Are there any questions or comments, board?
I can't resist. I feel like there's a joke about in-school suspension at home here that somebody needs to make.
Because you're luluing.
Sorry. No questions.
No questions. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and it is unanimous. We're now going to go to policy JJIE and JJIE-R, which is regarding student drug testing programs and the administrative rule regarding the student drug testing program. Do I have a motion on the floor regarding policy JJIE and the JJIE-R administrative rule?
Madam Chair, under the guidance of policy BDH, which gives the board the right to temporarily suspend board policies due to extreme emergencies, I move that the board approve the administration's request to temporarily suspend policy JJIE, student drug testing program, and JJIE-R, administrative rule due to COVID-19. The suspension will be in effect until the end of the 2020-2021 first semester.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Caldwell to walk us through that one, then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Mr. Caldwell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will say that this policy is, I'm sure, the one that brought about the most conversation because it is, we feel, critically important to what we do. I will counter that by saying Ms. Wood spoke eloquently earlier today about the charge that's given to school nurses through this public health crisis. And the truth of the matter is this is a function of our school nurses. And the way we operate this, it typically happens about twice a month. And students are called down in groups. If we did it one at a time, it would take the vast majority of a day to do that. And even in a, quote, normal school year, that wouldn't be real feasible. In the environment we're in now, it's next to impossible. So we're bringing kids together. Again, that's movement in and out of the classrooms. That's students being together for more than 15 minutes, likely unmasked and likely within, certainly within 6 feet, if not within 3 feet. There's the added component that almost 30% of our students are Lula. That's not to imply that 30% of our students eligible to be drug tested are virtual, but it does bring up the fact that some of our students, by virtue of being a Track C student, they would not be held accountable to this particular policy. So again, this is with mixed emotion that I bring this because, again, I really think it is a critical part of what we do with our Project Hope and our other students and giving them some opportunities. But again, based on where we are in our world and in our district, we think it's in our best interest that we suspend that temporarily.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Any questions or comments? One thing I would like to say that, you know, if Lula becomes, now that it's becoming a part of our Lexington One model, I think it would be important for us to kind of think how this policy we may look at it long-term after COVID, because, you know, that this board has always been very committed to keeping our students nicotine, drug-free, living their best life. And so I think that might be something we want to look at. I know that's not for tonight, but that's just a thought. Board, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Let me go back. We're going to suspend policy JJIE and JJIER. We have a motion from Mr. Anderson, a second from Mr. Powers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries and it is unanimous. I would just like to thank everyone tonight for all the work that went into this, and for us to have back-to-back board meetings. There's a lot going on. We will be meeting on October 6th. That meeting will be strictly dedicated to doing Dr. Little's annual evaluation. That will not be a COVID-centric meeting. So just to let you know, and then we will have our regular board meeting the third Tuesday in October. I would like to wish everybody a happy first day of fall, and we are getting close to finishing 2020 and seeing it in the rearview mirror.
Praise the Lord.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Oswald, Mr. Anderson, and Mr. Oswald, all in favor, please stand up, and thank you very much.